I'm afraid I have to apologise in advance for this weird booby light here. I haven't got curtains set up in the office yet, and it's just kind of there, so I'm going to try and sit back, not try and get it in the way. But yeah, apologies for that, it's a bit annoying. Let's get on with the video. Greetings and salutations, my beautiful people, and welcome back to CADDY'S from Fridays, where we talk about films and films happen. And today, we're talking about Trainspotting 2, a film which may not carry the same kind of shock value or the kind of smothering, uncomfortable atmosphere that completely shrouds you like in the original Trainspotting, but for the sake of being a sequel that's like 20 years after the first one, it carries on so much and changes and evolves so much that I'm gonna have to say this is probably one of my favourite films I've seen this year. Yes, I fucking loved this movie. I loved the first movie, and I thought this one was fucking great as well. I don't know if I'd say it was better, I don't even know if I'd say it was equal, but I still thought it was bloody great, honestly. And I knew it was gonna be pretty damn great the second that the title of the film appears, but it appears once Renton is in a hotel room, which is how the last film ends. It's kind of, there's that circle. It kind of, you know, the last film ends in a hotel room, the next film, it doesn't start in a hotel room, but the title, Trainspotting 2, appears in a hotel room when the film begins. And I thought, I was looking out for clever stuff like that from the beginning, and there was a lot of clever stuff to go through. So I wanted to kind of use this video to, yeah, kind of, well, I mean, this is a thoughts video, not necessarily a well-constructed review of it or anything like that, but I wanted to kind of list a couple of the things I thought were really clever after I talk about just a brief synopsis of why I thought the film itself was really good. I thought Trainspotting 2 was the perfect, aged and slightly less thrilling and slightly downplayed equivalent, counterpart even, to the original movie. The script is fantastic, there's never a dull moment in any of the characters' dialogues, and for the 20-year gap that there is, the script flourishes these same characters that you thought you knew in the original movie in new ways for all that time that's passed. The soundtrack I thought was fucking fantastic, it matched with every scene it was in really well, it spliced into the editing really well, the editing was so goddamn slick and it complements Danny Boyle's directing to a T, and there's lots of stylish, like hallucinatory kind of moments, like when characters are talking about things and they're making symbols with their hands, the symbols appear on the screen, kind of Tarantino-esque, like kind of Pulp Fiction-y kind of thing, you know, when Mia Wallace does the whole square or rectangle thing. Kind of like that, but I personally think a little bit more relevant to what's going on and a lot cooler. Like there's a part where, I think it's Renton going up a block of flats in an elevator, and the numbers of the elevator light up outside as an outdoor shot. They light up on the side of the building as he's going up. Stuff like that I thought was really fucking great. And I think in this film, I mean, there's quite a lot of it in the original movie as well, but I think there's a few more moments in this where you really don't know whether or not you should be laughing or just in astonishment or disbelief of what's happening. There are so many uncomfortable, emotionally twisting moments, and I will just say right now, spoiler warning, this is not going to be spoiler free because I want to talk about how much I loved it, which means I'm going to go into some detail here, so I'm going to give you a second to go. Okay, there's a part where Spud, one of the main characters, one of the more sympathetic characters from the original movie, is trying to commit suicide. It's not the first time he's tried, but he's trying again. And he tries to suffocate himself in a plastic bag. And then Renton comes in, he hasn't seen Renton in 20 years plus or whatever it is. So he's pretty much on the verge of death, and then Renton basically saves his life. Not before Spud throws up in this suffocated, airless plastic bag wrapped around his head. And yeah, there's quite a few bits like that in the original movie. There's the famous shitting themselves gag and the Renton like jumping into a toilet gag and everything. There's bits like that, but I kind of felt like that was a consistent tone with this film instead of just the sporadicness of the original one. And there's lots of moments like that where you really don't know whether or not you should be laughing because what you're seeing is funny, or yeah, like I said, astonished that it's even happening, or in disbelief, or sympathetic. You don't know how to feel, and the way that the characters deal with it, oftentimes they're not laughing at themselves either, so it's great how it does that, I think. And the acting is phenomenal from everybody. No complaints on any single cast member. Thought it was all great, all great. Now for listing some of the things that I thought were really smart in this film, like the original, Danny Boyle's very good at basically shooting scenes which make you feel perfectly inside the characters' heads. The intro, for instance, the very, very beginning when you first see Renton exercising in a gym, there's constant, it's a very effective intro really, there's constant flashes of exciting things and flashes of the past, but it's spliced in really, really quickly, like a couple of seconds each time, and then going back and forth with fast-paced music and stuff. It's all constantly going back and forth, which obviously complements how Renton is probably feeling, alive and free, and it's fast editing and everything, but not for the same reason that it would have been in the original, which would have been drug high. It was life high. It's that kind of thing. It's different kinds of flashbacks that you would have seen compared to the original movie. There's a great scene in the middle of the movie as well where Renton and Sick Boy are kind of like reliving cherished memories and stuff, and for the sake of maybe 4 or 5 seconds of a shot, there's an awesome moment where the corner of their bedroom pans out. They're reliving football memories, and the camera pans out and you see the corner of their bedroom stuck in the middle of a football stadium, and there's no one in the football stadium. It's an empty football stadium with rain coming down, and they get on their knees and they do the whole stupid, you know, football yay celebration thing, and then the camera pans back and you see how they're feeling about the whole thing. They feel like they're there, and it makes you feel like you're there, and that was for the sake of 4 or 5 seconds, that kind of shot. It's great. It's never revisited again. And Spud himself, one of the other characters, has quite a lot of in-your-head kind of scenes that are portrayed by the camera and everything. Like, there's a part where he feels like he needs to do something else with his life other than what he's been doing, so he tries to take up boxing. Very brief joke, which I thought was kind of funny. In his head, he imagines himself being Raging Bull, but it's Raging Spud. And it's all black and white, and it's all done like that, and he visions himself coming into a ring. Again, couple of seconds. It's that level of effort of making like jokes like that and getting in the characters' heads for brief moments, which I really appreciate. Spud also has his moments like in his suicide, for instance, one of his suicides near the start of the film, where as he's dripping out of consciousness, he imagines himself at the top of a building with all these empty chairs around him because of how alone he feels, and he just kind of tips off of the top of this skyscraper in a chair, and the closer he is to death, the closer to the ground he is in his head as he's falling. And then in the last moments of him trying to die, Renton comes in to try and rip the plastic bag open so that he stops suffocating, but he doesn't see it like that, and it's filmed in a way that makes Spud fall towards the ground and Renton come underneath him and grab him from falling. And then obviously it cuts straight back to reality, and he's being sick in a plastic bag. That's pretty cool. I also liked how when Spud is still trying to deal with his addiction, there's a moment where he's sitting in a corner and you can see his shadow doing different things from what he's doing. It's cool. There's an extremely uncomfortable and unpredictable scene where Renton and Sick Boy try and con a load of people in a massively, massively dodgy bar, really politically motivated kind of nasty bar, and they try and get out and they can't because the bodyguard wants them to sing a song before they go, so they have to make up a song on the spot to all these people that could literally tear them to pieces. So they start making up this song, and that scene in itself is very uncomfortably funny and like everything. But then there's loads of shots as like there's a shot of the camera on the microphone right up at Renton's lips, and then they move from Renton's lips to the audience as he's doing callbacks, and stuff like that makes you feel way more involved in the scene, and it makes you feel that much more uncomfortable, and like you don't know where the chaos is going to begin. You're part of the chaos. And of course I really loved how in every other scene there'd be a freeze frame in the middle of the action. Not a freeze frame to cut to something else, but something unexpected will happen, and then the freeze frame will pause for just a brief moment to make you reflect or predict on what's going to happen, and then the scene carries on as it were. And it's just, I love how it does that. The themes of the differences between the middle class and working class gap that were in the original movie with Scotland as a whole, they're still in this film, but there's obviously a lot more of a disconnect because of how much has changed in the world generally in the last 20 years with technology and advertising and how much more money people have. And the main characters are very, very disconnected, not just from the world around them, not to a massive extent, they've embraced as much as they can, but they're disconnected from it and they don't quite understand it as well as they used to back in the past. And they're also disconnected with themselves a little bit. And what I love is that there's this constant kind of mentioning of technology and modernity and all this like high-tech modern stuff which no one was really obviously doing back in like the 90s. And there's constant bringing up of it, like social media and all this stuff. But what I found very interesting was because of this disconnect between what the characters were used to being like and what they're like now, technology itself of today actually screws them over in a few scenes. There's text conversations on their iPhones which are misinterpreted. There's a part where Renton is hiding from Begbie, who basically wants to kill him after he got him locked up in a prison for 20 years. But he's hiding from him, and then his iPhone goes off and it fucks the whole thing up, and he has to then run again. And Begbie himself, once he gets out of prison, he tries to enroll his son into his kind of way of life, which is just awful. And there's a bit where he attempts a robbery on someone's house, and the robbery itself, not just because his son is not cut out for that kind of stuff, but the robbery itself doesn't work out because they're in a very high-tech house. You can see picture frames, and the picture frames are electronic, and they're constantly changing between pictures of their family on their own little screens and stuff. So you can tell it's a high-tech house, and because of all this tech and stuff everywhere, things get knocked over, and that screws them over, and they have to fight their way out of it. And the funny thing is that unlike the original movie, where you could argue that the drug situation and the addiction situation is what ruins most of their life and ruins most of what's going on in the film and messes up things and causes inconveniences. In this film, that's not even really majorly the case whatsoever. It's more of a case of, well, just everything else around them that's becoming the problem alongside their own personal conflicts. And a new character, Veronica, because of where the plot is going and everything, she's the one that actually comes out with all this money that the characters from a certain point are trying to inherit in order to make a business, but the business itself falls through, and she ends up with all of the inherited money from the project that was given to them by Scotland themselves. So it's like, there's just loads of bits like that I thought were really cool. And there seems to be like a kind of constant message being thrown into the film, which is don't hang on to the past, especially even if you enjoyed those moments of the past, hang on to those moments. Very prominent theme of the film, moving on. And the plot, like I said, even though there's that one part with them trying to start their own business and everything, it's not for the the same reasons you'd expect it to be happening. It's not because the plot itself revolves around everyone trying to make up, as it were. That's what Renton thinks in his head because of his guilt over the last film. But the plot is basically Renton leaving his new life that he started afresh and actually doing something with his life, and coming back to try and deal with some of his guilt and make up with everything and leave everything in a stable state. That's basically what he wants to do. But then what he ends up coming back to is everybody trying to outsmart each other and everybody feeling resentment and just malice and horrible feelings towards each other, apart from like Spud, bless him. But then even he has resentment because he was the biggest addict out of all of them, arguably, and even though Renton feels sympathy for him at the end of Trainspotting 1 and leaves him with a little bit of the money that he stole from their last drug deal, as it were, he hates him for that because he knew that all he was going to do was blow his cut of the money on stuff to inject and sniff. The characters themselves don't appear to have changed that much, but the world around them and how they view certain situations and how they view each other kind of has. And there's even an awesome scene when Renton and Sick Boy meet up for the first time in 20 years, and there's obviously very awkward back and forth, and you can tell there's a bitterness there. And then Sick Boy starts beating the shit out of Renton. And while he's doing that, there's a guy sitting in the pub that Sick Boy inherited from, I think he said it was Nan or his aunt, I can't remember. But yeah, he's running this pub which is just empty and barren and there's no money coming in or anything. And there's this one guy who's drinking at the bar who's watching this chaos and blood and broken like snooker sticks and everything. They're all breaking and there's blood and shit everywhere. And instead of saying anything, doing anything, leaving, he sits there and guards his drinks. A funny moment and a very sweet detail, but also another showing off of the fact that the characters and everything that they know probably hasn't really changed. It's what everyone else in their own little bubbles are used to. They're used to seeing that, they're used to dealing with that. And that explains more and more why they're so stuck in the past. They're reliving onto the moments of their lives which they really damn enjoyed, even if they were complete useless people, really, all things considered. But everything else that they've got even now is similar to how it was, if not identical to how it was before. Not just including the man guarding his drinks at the bar and what he's probably seen going on in bars, but like everything. I mean, there's Keris pointed out there was an awesome shot, and whether or not this is a reference or not is debatable, but she seemed to think it was, which I wouldn't blame her for. But there's a crib that's standing out in the middle of a rubbish tip at one point in the film in a shot. And it's the only thing that stands out against all the black kind of rubbish. It's the only white thing, I think she said. She was thinking that the idea with that was that that was the crib, which is revealed in the first movie, that Sick Boy had a kid who he was a secret dad to and he didn't tell anybody, and because he was so high, he didn't realise that this kid was dying, and this kid dies in the original movie, and this crib is there, and it's like, she seems to think that it was the crib that was used in the first film on the rubbish tip, and I wouldn't blame her for thinking that. It's a reflection of the darker times in the middle of all the rubbish and everything, and it's not gone anywhere. And there's even an awesome shot where Renton goes back to see his parents at his parents' house, which still looks exactly the same as it did in the original movie, and he sits down at a dinner table with his dad, but his mum's died since the last movie. And there's a shot that calls back exactly the same to the first movie, but there's no mother at the dinner table, but her Renton's shadow is casted onto where she would be sitting against the wall at the dinner table. So clever, so well done. Any younger person that was in the original movie that have moved on with the times, especially like Diane, for instance, who's now a lawyer, it's a constant reminder of how stuck in the past they are and how they haven't really done much and everything, and it's just constantly looming over them. And even the negative things of the past, like the crib in the skip, if that is of course what they were going for, yeah, it's just constant weighing down on everybody. And despite the fact that you can talk about the social or political differences or whatever between what happened in the first movie and this movie, and the economic differences, absolutely, even though you can talk about all of that stuff and how it affects everybody, it's funny how in this film it seems as though the world around them seems a lot more forgiving and a lot more open and a lot easier on them. Like they managed to get their potentially illegally run illegal business off the ground because they got the funding for it at the end of the film. So it seems to give them a lot more chances, which is a far cry from the first movie, how everything treats them like, well, duh, hence why they never really come out of their rut. But despite that, there's still that resentment there, and it just carries on throughout the whole film, and it just really rams in how stuck in the past these characters are. And you can even have that illustrated by the more subtle details, like the use of the soundtrack from the first movie being spliced in once or twice sporadically in different particular moments. Or there's a callback shot to Renton nearly getting killed by a car and just looks at the driver through the windscreen and laughs. That's a callback to the original movie, obviously. And the ending scene, especially when Renton goes back to his parents' house, goes to his bedroom from his parents' house from the original movie, and he puts his old records on, and then he starts just kind of letting loose like he used to, not drugs, but just kind of letting loose in his head. The camera pulls back, and then the room gets longer. It just keeps getting longer and longer and longer, and then it gets faster as it pulls back to simulate a train, obviously. But even that doesn't last too long for the ending, and then the credits start rolling and everything. But it's all moments like that. They're very brief and very sudden and very, like I said, sporadic and just fleeting. They're moments from the past that they desperately want to relive and remember and keep to themselves and feel as though they have some place and some soul left in the world, but like I said, it's just fleeting. It just happens and it goes, and that's all they've got to live on, just these fleeting moments. And then at the end, when everything starts pulling back and it gets longer, it signifies potentially that Renton is coming to terms with everything and he's accepting the past and trying to move on with everything, but still managing to enjoy what he had before. It's just really clever stuff. It's really clever. And in the end of the movie, especially, like, Renton redeems his relationship with his parents. There's a beautiful hugging scene with him and his dad, which is very emotional. And even Begbie, of all bloody characters, he even redeems his relationship with his family, and he still manages to do, like, a good thing. He still manages to make up and explain and try and figure out why he's so different from his family and explain why he is and everything. And he comes to terms with how his son is and everything before going back to prison at the very, very end of the movie, like he should do. Absolutely, he's a horrible person, but it's still really weird to see that. And then Spud especially, bless him, I'd say he was the secondary main character, honestly, for everything he does and everything he stands for in the story. But at one point in the story, he figures out that his calling to life, because he's trying to constantly find some reason to exist, his calling is writing. He loves to write, and he can write, and he's very good at writing. So he finds his calling, and he decides to write down journalistically, I suppose, everything that happened in the first movie and everything that's going on now, and he's poetically describing situations that they all experience. And at the end of the movie, Veronica is talking to him. By the way, sorry to not explain, Veronica is Sick Boy's girlfriend as well, I should say that. But she's talking to him and saying how much she loves what he's written. She basically pushes him to get the work published. And then at the end of the film, she says she knows the perfect title, which is obviously Trainspotting. which then made me think, does that necessarily mean then that the reason that the films exist is because Spud himself, in the universe of the movies, wrote the books, which then the films that you're watching are based on? Because if that's the case, then that is an incredibly happy ending for Spud, but it's not directly spoken to you, it's something to speculate. But that's how I saw it. I saw it as Spud basically making something of his life and having everything that happened documented in these two films. And that idea, and obviously the stories were written by a real author and blah blah blah, but having those two films then treated as like almost based on the excerpts of Spud, as it were, it then shows off without showing you Spud with loads of money or Spud happy or anything. It illustrates how successful his work could have been, as it were. So then you can imagine that he's probably got the happiest ending out of all of them for being the most sympathetic and tragic character out of the whole lot. And again, it's a subtle detail, but it's so well illustrated just from the use of cinema, the use of the shots, the use of the script, the use of, well, just the idea of cinema and the fact that you're sitting down and watching a film in the first place. It makes you think, it's reflective. It's fucking awesome. I mean, you can call me pretentious, whatever, but I am going to give Trainspotting 2 a fucking must-see. I would definitely say watch the original movie first, because a lot of it's a sequel, you need to kind of watch the original first, but as a standalone movie, it's fucking great. I still recommend it, but it's a must-see if you love the original Trainspotting. I've got nothing much else to say. I really fucking loved it. It's a keeper on the shelf, definitely, when it comes out on Blu-ray, absolutely. And yeah, that's all. Yeah, call me pretentious for looking into it too deeply or whatever. It made me feel like that. It made me feel like I was looking into it deeply. And it's nice to watch a film that makes you think. It's really good. And not fucking stalks. Oh, and it's also interesting to note that it is an 18 as well. And I can't remember the last time I saw an 18 movie in the fucking cinema, because everything's a 12A, PG-13 as it were in America, or a 15. They never get pushed, but Danny Boyle wanted to make his own movie in his own way, with his own characters, and didn't care about all the audience potential reach it was going to have. It was going to be a gritty 18 movie like the original, and it did its purpose really fucking well. So, I know that shouldn't be a point to merit on, because you'd think everyone would want to make what they want to make, but you'd be surprised how money and everything is driven into these kinds of things. So, as a film on its own, it's awesome. It's good to see something as fresh as that in the cinemas again. Farewell, everybody, and until next time, take care.